Module 2, Lesson 9 moves us to working with decimals. Your objectives for Lesson 9 are that you are able to relate decimals to mixed numbers. You can round estimate a reasonable answer to an addition or subtraction of decimals problem. You will be able to find the sum and differences of decimals, and you will be able to use place value to solve problems in a real-world context. Now, the vocabulary. Sum is the answer to an addition problem. Difference is the answer to a subtraction problem. Your examples. First thing you need to keep in mind, place value gives the denominator if you're taking a decimal and turning it into a mixed number or a fraction. So a 3 and 42 hundredths, 3.42. My 2 is in the hundreds place, which gives me 100 as my denominator. The number 42 is the numerator. My whole number is the whole number in the mixed. So 3 and 42 hundredths, both of these are even numbers, which means they both could be divided by 2. And that would give me 3 and 21 fiftieths. Now we have another one. We have 4 and 1/10, 4.1, that's in the tenths place. And so we just put whole number 4 because it's before the decimal. The number becomes my numerator and the place value is my denominator. So if you are unsure of place value, this is the decimal. You have ones, tenths, hundredths, and thousandths. So those are your places. So if it's in this, the last number is in this spot, the denominator is a 10. The last number is in this spot, the denominator is a 100. And if the last number is in this spot, the denominator will be 1000. Now, with the addition and subtraction of decimals, you have to always remember that the decimals must be lined up. So here's my first one on the left. We have 4 and 25 hundredths plus 1 and 5/10. So I line up my decimals here, but I'm missing a spot after the last number. So I'm going to add a 0 so it's all the same. 5 plus 0 is 5. 5 plus 2 is 7. Bring down the decimal. 4 plus 1 is 5. So my answer would be 5 and 75 hundredths. Over here I have 3 and 142 thousandths minus 2 and 3/10. I need to line up my decimals in order to solve this. So I have a 3 and 142 thousandths minus a 2 and 3/10. I have to add zeros on the end so that I have the same number of digits. 2 minus 0 is 2. 4 minus 0 is 4. 1 minus 3, I have to borrow here. That becomes an 11 minus 3, which gives me an 8. Bring down my decimal. 2 minus 2 is 0. And so my answer would be 842 thousandths. Looking in the book, Lesson 9, you have 25 and 3/10 plus 376 and 77 hundredths. So let's go ahead and write the place values out here so that we remember them as we look at all of our numbers. So again, we have the ones place here. I'm going to turn it to the side. So we have the ones place. After the decimal, we have the tenths place. And then the hundredths place. And lastly, the thousandths. Please write that down so you have it as a reference. So, using that as my reference, I have a 25 and 3/10. Over here, tenths is the first spot after the decimal. So that would mean my 3 belongs in the first spot after the decimal. So that's 25 and 3/10. And then I need to add, and I'm adding 376 and 77 hundredths. I go over here, hundredths is the second spot, so that means it's going to go 7 and 7. And so that's 376 and 77 hundredths. Adding my 0, so we have the same number of digits. 7 plus 0 is 7. 7 plus 3 is 10. I carry my 1. My decimal comes down. 6 plus 5 is 11. Plus 1 is 12. Carry my 1. 7 plus 2 is 9, plus 1 is 10, carry my 1. 3 plus 1 is 4, so then my answer is 402 and 7/10. If I wanted to write that, or 7/100. If I wanted to write that as a fraction, I would have 402 and 7/100, all because the 7 is in the hundredths place. So I'll go ahead and put that. If the question is in fractions, you should give your answer in fractions. So that's 402 and 7/100. Down here we have another example, but the issue here is that we have a 5 and a 2. Neither of those are in the place values, but you can create equivalent fractions to solve them using place value. So 5 and 10, their least common multiple is 10. So I could take my 2 times 5 and my 1 times 5, and I would get 275 and 5/10. And my 5 times 2 gives me 10, so I take my 1 times 2, and that gives me 2/10 is the fraction. My whole number stays. So now it's 426 and 2/10 minus 275 and 5/10. These are equivalent fractions, therefore it will result in the same answer. So now I'm going to write them as decimals to make it easier. 426 and 2/10, which means the 2 goes in the tenths place. And I'm subtracting 275 and 5/10, so my 5 goes in the tenths place. I have to borrow, make that a 12. 12 minus 5 is 7. My decimal comes straight down. 5 minus 5 is 0. I can't do that. I have to borrow from my 4. This becomes a 12. 12 minus 7 is 5. 3 minus 2 is 1. So then my answer is 150 and 7/10. Again, with this being in the tenths place, I can say my answer is 150 and 7/10. Now, on the next page, you have 5 word problems. I'm going to have you solve some of them. I'm going to do number 1 with you, and then you will be required to do 2, 3, and 5. So I guess I can do 1 and 4. Samantha and her friends are going on a road trip that is 245 and 7/50 miles long. They've already driven 128 and 53/100. How much further do they have to go? So they're looking for a difference. They're saying that this is the whole trip. So this is what I have. That's what we're going to start with. And then this is how much they've done. They want to know how much is left. So how much further do they have to go? We're going to subtract. I know it's subtraction because how far they have left to go will not be longer than what they already are going to go for the whole trip. So the only option is subtraction. So we have 245 and 7/50 miles minus 128 and 53/100 miles. So this is already with the place value as my denominator, and so that means this one is already 128 and 53/100. Now this one I have to change because my 50 is not a place value, but 50 times 2 is a place value, so my equivalent fraction means I have to take 7 times 2. And so then this becomes 245 and 14/100 miles minus 128 and 53/100 miles. So I'm going to convert this into a decimal so it looks the same as that. So that's 245 and 14/100 miles minus 128 and 53 miles. I need to line up my decimals. So that is going to be 245 and 14/100 minus 128 and 53/100. 4 minus 3 is 1. I have to borrow from my 5 to make that an 11. 11 minus 5 is 6. bring down my decimal. 4 minus 8 I can't do. That becomes a 3. This becomes a 14. 14 minus 8 is 6. 3 minus 2 is 1. 2 minus 1 is 1. And so my answer would be they have 116 and 61 hundredths miles to go. And again, I'm able to say 61 hundredths because the 61 ends in the hundredths place. So let's go on over to number 4. Number 4, we have this one already with a place value, so that's just 78 21 hundredths. And she completed another 34 and 23 25ths pictures. How many pictures does she still have to paint? So she figured she still had this much to paint. And then if she completed this much, how much would she have left? So this is another subtraction problem. Addition's the same process. You have to turn them into decimals, looking at their fraction, making sure you have the place value. Or what you'll do for number 5 is actually divide to find the decimal. It actually works the same. You could do that as well. 21 divided by 100 is 0.21. 23 divided by 25 will be what we'll find. So for number 5, just make sure that you write down fraction decimal, numerator divided by denominator. And I'll show you what the first one is. So we're starting with what we have, 78 and 21 hundredths pictures. We're going to paint 34 and 23 25ths. Now, 25 times 4 is 100, so I need to take 23 times 4. So we have a 78 and 21 hundredths pictures minus 34, and that would be 92 hundredths pictures. If you can't do that in your head, just jot it over to the side. 4 times 2 is 8, plus 1 is 92. Then I can turn this into a decimal, so I have a 78 and 21 hundredths pictures minus 34 and 92 hundredths pictures. Now I just need to line up my decimals. 78 21 hundredths minus 34 and 92 hundredths. I can't take 1 minus 2, so I have to borrow. That becomes a 1. This becomes an 11. 11 minus 2 is 9. I have to borrow from my 8. That becomes a 7. This becomes an 11. 11 minus 9 is 2. My decimals come straight down. 7 minus 4 is 3. 7 minus 3 is 4. So she will have, you could say Ariana will have 43 and 29 hundredths paintings left to paint. And this would be my answer. And again, I was able to write this as a fraction because my question gave me fractions, so I needed to put it back into a fraction. But then I just looked at my answer, looked at my place value. 9 was in the hundredths place, therefore my denominator would be 100, and then I was able to write my answer. Ariana will have 43 and 29 hundredths paintings left to paint. Now, below it, you can see that I wrote numerator divided by denominator because down here you have two fractions that actually do not result in a place value no matter how you multiply them. And so I gave you the first one. 1/3 is 0.3 repeating always. And so you don't even need to divide to find that. That's something I would like you to memorize. So 78 and 33 hundredths gallons last month. That's what this one is. This one, you're going to have to take 3 divided by 8 to figure out what the decimal is, 41 and something. And you just need to divide to get that. Once you complete 2, 3, and 5, please have me check it so you can move on to the next part.